The pan hissed like a snake right beside me, the sound sharp in the noisy kitchen. Boiling oil popped, spitting tiny, angry droplets against the gleaming stainless steel counter. I reached for the large metal spoon sitting next to it, ready to stir the sauce simmering on the back burner. Just as my fingers closed around the handle, another hand, his hand, Julian Vance's hand, appeared beside mine. With a deliberate, almost casual movement, he tilted the hot pan ever so slightly towards me. A thin streak of shimmering oil splattered out, landing dangerously close to my exposed forearm, missing my skin by maybe half an inch. I flinched back instantly, biting down hard on the inside of my cheek to stop a yelp of surprise and fear. He chuckled, a low, nasty sound that cut through the kitchen clatter. "Careful, Grandma," he said, his voice dripping with fake concern as he straightened the pan. He walked off towards the pass-through window with that smug grin plastered on his young face. A couple of the younger line cooks snickered along with him, seeking his favor. But I didn't laugh. I just stood there, watching him leave, my hand trembling slightly, not from the near miss, not from pain, but from the cold, hard promise forming inside me. He'd regret ever calling me Grandma. He hadn't always been the golden boy, the celebrated Chef Julian Vance, whose face was plastered on magazine covers. I remembered when he first started here, barely out of culinary school, all nerves and clumsy hands. He burned rice regularly, oversalted soup more times than I could count, and shadowed my every move at the sauce station. I was the one who taught him the basics, the foundations he now built his fancy reputation on. I showed him how to properly clarify butter, how to build flavor in layers, how to achieve the perfect consistency for a hollandaise without it breaking. I even lent him my personal secret spice blend one frantic Saturday night when he messed up a large batch of stew just before service. But fame, or maybe just the taste of power, makes fools grow fangs. Now he was the headliner, the star of the restaurant, while I was often relegated to cleaning the prep station or peeling vegetables after the main rush. Everyone seemed to have forgotten who trained him, who patiently corrected his mistakes. Everyone except me. I remembered every detail, and I knew that behind the perfect smile and the television appearances, he was still just that insecure kitchen boy, desperate to prove himself, even if it meant stepping on others. The announcement came during the pre-shift meeting. Mr. Sterling, the owner, stood beaming at the front of the kitchen. Our restaurant, The Gilded Spoon, had been chosen to feature in the National Golden Flame Cook-Off. It was a huge deal, a live broadcast competition watched by millions with renowned judges and massive media attention. And representing us, Mr. Sterling declared, gesturing dramatically towards Julian, will be our very own star, Chef Julian Vance. Applause erupted from the staff, mostly the younger ones who idolized him. Julian soaked it in, nodding graciously like he just won an Oscar. But my eyes caught something else on the official sign-up sheet pinned to the bulletin board. Open participation encouraged for all Gilded Spoon culinary staff. My heart gave a little jump. Later, after the meeting, I walked over and signed my name, Elena Marrow, right under his flourishing signature. He noticed me almost immediately, sauntering over with that familiar smirk. "Didn't know they allowed retirees in this competition, Elena," he whispered, leaning close. I simply smiled back, my voice as calm and smooth as cream poured over warm soup. "Didn't know they allowed cheaters either, Julian." His grin faded, just enough for me to know. He remembered exactly what I meant. It happened 2 years ago, during a smaller local chef competition. I had been perfecting a new sauce, a smoked rosemary beurre blanc, spending weeks tweaking the balance of flavors, the infusion time for the rosemary, the exact temperature to achieve that velvety texture. Julian had watched me, asked questions, tasted samples. I thought he was just learning, eager like he used to be. Then, on the day of the competition, he presented my sauce. He called it his signature creation. The judges were blown away. They praised its complexity, its originality. He took home the trophy, basked in the local news coverage, and never once acknowledged where the recipe came from. That was the first time I saw his true face, the ambition that overshadowed any sense of loyalty or honesty. I hadn't said anything then. Confronting him would have just made me look better, like sour grapes. But I kept everything. Every scribbled recipe note with dates in the margins. Every photograph I'd taken on my old phone documenting the dish's progress, from initial concept to final plating. I even had the email where I had excitedly described the sauce to my sister weeks before the competition. He thought he had gotten away with it. He thought I had forgotten or given up. He was wrong.
The silent war began almost immediately after I signed up for the Golden Flame. It started small, petty things designed to undermine my confidence and disrupt my work. Ingredients would go missing from my prep station just when I needed them. My favorite paring knife, the one with the perfectly worn handle, would be inexplicably moved or hidden under a pile of dirty rags. He'd walk past me during service and whisper insults under his breath, just loud enough for me to hear, but quiet enough that no one else would notice. "Running slow today, Grandma," or "still using recipes from the last century." I'd let him. I didn't react, didn't complain, didn't rise to the bait. People always underestimate those who stay silent, mistaking quiet endurance for weakness. But I had a plan taking shape, a slow simmering recipe for justice that required patience. And patience has always been my sharpest knife, honed over 30 years in chaotic kitchens. I started documenting everything. Using the discreet audio recording app on my phone, I captured his muttered insults, his angry outbursts at other staff members, his lazy shortcuts when Mr. Sterling wasn't looking. Every piece of evidence was saved, dated, and stored securely. And then, one Tuesday night, the perfect opportunity walked right into my kitchen, completely unannounced. Arthur Hemlock was the kind of food critic legends were made of, or rather, careers were destroyed by. He arrived without a reservation, slipping into a corner booth like a phantom, his presence sending immediate ripples of panic through the front of house. Julian predictably lost his cool. His face went pale and his hands started shaking slightly as he barked orders. "Elena, cover the sauce station. Everything needs to be perfect," he snapped, sweat beading on his forehead, despite the kitchen's air conditioning. I obeyed immediately, stepping up to manage the delicate emulsions and reductions that were my specialty, even though Julian usually insisted on overseeing them himself when critics were present. As I checked the consistency of his so-called signature sauce, the smoked rosemary beurre blanc he had stolen from me, an idea sparked. On impulse, I reached for the small container of white vinegar used for cleaning stainless steel. Just a tiny splash, barely half a teaspoon, went into the large pot, enough to subtly flatten the flavor, introduce a faint bitterness, throw the balance off just slightly for a truly discerning palate like Hemlock's. Julian tasted it quickly, too panicked to notice the minor change. The dish went out. Minutes later, Hemlock left mid-meal, his face a mask of disappointment. Julian didn't know it was me. He just knew his signature dish had failed him.
The next evening, Julian called me into his small office after the dinner rush had ended. The space smelled faintly of stale cigars and desperation. I braced myself, thinking maybe, just maybe, the disastrous review that had appeared online that morning, calling his signature dish unbalanced and surprisingly bitter, might have humbled him. Perhaps he suspected my involvement, or perhaps he simply needed someone to blame and I was the easiest target. I hoped, foolishly, for an apology, or at least a professional discussion about what went wrong. Instead, he didn't even look at me. He tossed a greasy rag onto the desk in front of me. "Clean the fryers," he said, his voice flat and cold. "They're disgusting. Been neglected all week." I stared at him, then at the rag, the smell of old cooking oil suddenly heavy and suffocating in the small room. I didn't move. He finally looked up, his eyes filled with a chilling mixture of resentment and contempt. He leaned closer across the desk, lowering his voice to a menacing whisper. "You belong here, Elena, downstairs, in the grease, where old cooks go to fade away." The way he spat my name, turning it into an insult, sealed his fate more surely than any lock. I didn't say a word. I just picked up the rag and walked out, but the cold resolve inside me had solidified into something unbreakable. You don't survive 30 years in professional kitchens by keeping your head down and your mouth shut. You survive by building alliances, by earning trust, by knowing how to listen. After Julian's insult in the office, I started to activate the whisper network I had cultivated over decades. I started quietly, subtly. A carefully placed question to Maria at the dishwashing station, who saw everything. A sympathetic ear offered to young Leo, the waiter Julian had berated during the Saturday rush. A shared pot of coffee with Sophia, the pastry chef who had worked alongside me for 15 years. The waitstaff adored me. I always made sure they had a bite to eat during long shifts and treated them with respect Julian never showed. The dishwashers trusted me. I knew their kids' names and always asked about their families. Soon, information started flowing my way like a steady stream. Stories of Julian's tantrums when cameras weren't rolling. Details about the suppliers he secretly bribed for better cuts of meat, leaving less for the rest of us. The exact date and time he made Anya, the new waitress, cry in the walk-in cooler over a dropped plate. Every rumor, every confirmed incident, every whispered complaint went into a private folder on my computer, backed up securely. Dates, times, names of witnesses. His downfall wasn't just going to be about a stolen recipe. It was going to be about his character.
The pressure of the upcoming Golden Flame competition was clearly getting to Julian. His temper flared more easily, his commands grew sharper, and the tension in the kitchen became a constant simmering heat. One particularly chaotic Friday night, during the peak of dinner service, he snapped. Orders were backing up, a large party was complaining, and Julian was pacing behind the line like a caged tiger. I needed to get to the lowboy refrigerator for more cream, located in the narrow space between the grill station and the fryers where Julian was currently expediting. "Excuse me, chef," I said, trying to squeeze past him respectfully. He didn't answer, just shoved past me abruptly to grab a ticket from the printer. As he pushed by, the side of my wrist grazed the searing hot flat-top grill. Skin bubbled instantly, the pain sharp and sickening. I bit my lip hard, sucking in a breath to keep from crying out, cradling my wrist. He stopped, looked down at the bright red mark blooming on my skin, then looked directly into my eyes. A flicker of something, surprise, annoyance, crossed his face. Then he smirked. "Careful where you stand, Grandma." The kitchen staff went utterly silent, all eyes on us. The sizzle of steaks and the clatter of pans seemed to fade away. I didn't scream. I didn't curse. I did something better. I held his gaze and smiled back, a slow, deliberate smile that didn't reach my eyes. That night after my shift, I sat alone in my quiet apartment. The throbbing pain in my wrist was a constant reminder of Julian's cruelty. I carefully unwrapped the temporary bandage the kitchen first aid kit provided. The burn was angry red, already starting to blister across the delicate skin. Instead of reaching for antibiotic ointment, I went to my pantry and took out the jar of raw honey my neighbor, who kept bees, and swore by its healing properties. Gently, I applied the cool, sticky honey over the burn, then wrapped it loosely with clean gauze. I looked at the blistering skin under the soft kitchen light and whispered to it, "You're healing for something bigger than this." The physical pain was intense, a searing heat that radiated up my arm, but it felt different from the dull ache of humiliation Julian inflicted daily. Pain is temporary, I reminded myself, thinking of all the cuts and burns I'd endured over 30 years. Humiliation, however, festers. It lingers. He thought he had hurt me, physically marked me as less capable, reinforced his dominance in that moment of public cruelty. But what he had really done was solidify my resolve. He had given me undeniable, visible motive. The Golden Flame contest was just 2 weeks away. This wasn't just about reclaiming a stolen recipe anymore. This was about justice. This burn wasn't just an injury, it was fuel.
With the competition drawing closer, I kicked my secret training into high gear. Every night, after the kitchen closed and the last staff member had left, I stayed behind. Under the dim glow of the service lights, I transformed my usual prep station into a laboratory. I tested recipes, refining techniques, timing each step with a stopwatch. My focus was razor sharp. I filmed myself on my old smartphone, propped up against a stack of cookbooks, perfecting the plating, ensuring every movement was efficient, graceful. I logged every measurement, every adjustment to seasoning, every subtle change in flame level in a new notebook dedicated solely to the Golden Flame. My late husband's photograph, yellowed with age, sat propped against the spice rack, watching me. Antonio had been a chef too, old school, the kind who believed that the food you cooked revealed your character, your integrity. I found myself talking to his picture sometimes, whispering updates in the quiet kitchen. "You'd laugh if you saw who I'm up against, Tony," I murmured one night while whisking a sauce. "All flash, no substance, thinks he's king." Then, late one Thursday, while reaching for the paprika, my fingers brushed against a loose tile behind the main spice rack. Curiosity piqued, I gently pried it open. Tucked inside the small hidden cavity was a folded piece of paper, Julian's secret ingredient list for the competition. I unfolded the paper carefully. Most of the ingredients listed were standard for high-end cuisine: saffron, truffle oil, imported mushrooms. But one item jumped out at me, listed simply as Amazonian fire leaf. My blood ran cold. I recognized the name immediately. It was an exotic herb known for its intense, unique flavor, but it was also banned for import in the United States due to toxicity concerns and unsustainable harvesting practices. Julian was using an illegal ingredient to get an edge. I remembered smelling something unusual, sharp and slightly medicinal near his private prep area a few days ago. He must have been experimenting with it. Sneaking a glance towards the kitchen entrance to ensure I was still alone, I went to his locked cabinet where he kept his personal stash of expensive spices. The lock was cheap. An old trick with a thin knife popped it open easily. Inside, hidden beneath bags of legitimate spices, was a small, unlabeled pouch containing dried, dark red leaves. The sharp, distinct smell confirmed my suspicion. This was the fire leaf. Carefully, I took just a small sample, barely a pinch, tucking it into a clean plastic baggie I sealed tightly. Just in case. Because when you play dirty in a supposedly clean, professional kitchen, someone eventually notices. And that someone was me. I put everything back exactly as I found it, ensuring no trace of my discovery remained. The day of the Golden Flame competition arrived like a storm front, charged, electric, and heavy with anticipation. The temporary kitchen set up in the convention center buzzed with nervous energy. Lights glared, cameras swooped on cranes, and the air crackled with the pressure of live television. Julian strutted onto the set wearing his crisp white chef's jacket like a suit of armor, flashing his practiced smile for the cameras, shaking hands with judges, soaking in the attention. I kept to myself, finding my assigned station and methodically arranging my tools and ingredients. My space was spotless, organized, reflecting the quiet focus I felt inside. My simple black chef's coat felt comfortable, familiar. When the starting whistle blew, a wave of adrenaline washed over me, but my hands remained steady.
I moved with the efficiency of 3 decades of muscle memory, chopping, sautéing, whisking. I cooked like I'd never cooked before, not faster, but clearer, with a quiet mind focused solely on the food. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Julian working with theatrical flair, tossing ingredients, making dramatic gestures for the cameras. He kept glancing over at my station, a flicker of irritation crossing his face when he saw I wasn't rattled, wasn't intimidated by the chaos or his presence. He expected me to crumble under the pressure. He didn't know this pressure was my element. Then I saw him reach under his counter for the small, unlabeled container holding his secret spice. He carefully measured out a portion, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. I smiled to myself. Julian sprinkled the dark red powder generously over his main course component, a pan-seared piece of exotic fish. He clearly believed this illegal Amazonian fire leaf was his secret weapon, the key to dazzling the judges with a flavor they'd never experienced. He'd probably used just enough in testing to enhance the dish, but under the pressure of the cameras, seeking that extra wow factor, he added too much. What he didn't know was that the powder he was using wasn't fire leaf at all. Earlier that morning, during the pre-competition setup when everyone was distracted, I had accessed his station. His hidden container was easy to find. Working quickly, shielded by my own equipment boxes, I had carefully swapped the contents. I replaced the dangerous banned herb with a harmless but visually identical powder made from finely ground, intensely bitter dried chicory root, mixed with a touch of paprika for color. It wouldn't hurt anyone, but it would taste absolutely terrible, especially in the quantity he was using. When the judges received his beautifully plated dish, their initial expressions were appreciative. They lifted their forks, took their first bites. Confusion spread across their faces almost instantly. One judge subtly frowned. Another reached quickly for his water glass. Julian, watching their reactions, froze. His confident posture dissolved, and his face went pale under the bright lights of television. Then, right on cue, as the judges politely set Julian's dish aside, the servers presented mine. Perfectly cooked scallops resting on a pool of velvety smoked rosemary beurre blanc, his stolen sauce, flawlessly executed, served back to him on a national stage. Judge Dubois, a notoriously tough critic with a world-renowned palate, took a slow, deliberate taste of my beurre blanc. He closed his eyes for a moment, savoring it. Then he looked directly at me, a brow raised in curiosity. "This sauce," he began, his French accent making the words precise, "it tastes remarkably familiar, almost identical to a signature dish I recall for Chef Vance a couple of years ago at a regional competition." The camera zoomed in on my face. The live audience murmured. Julian looked like he might actually faint. I simply nodded, meeting the judge's gaze calmly. "It should, Chef Dubois," I replied, my voice steady and clear, amplified by the microphone clipped to my jacket, "because it is my recipe." From the pocket of my apron, I pulled out the evidence I had carefully preserved. The laminated handwritten recipe card dated 3 years prior. The time-stamped photo, printed from my old phone, showing the exact same dish plated in my home kitchen long before Julian ever claimed it. I handed the items to the judge nearest me. The audience gasped collectively as the evidence was displayed on the large screens overhead. Julian stared at me, his face a mask of disbelief and horror, like he'd seen a ghost rising from the ashes of his deceit. But I wasn't done yet. This was just the first course of his public humiliation. Chef Vance, Judge Dubois turned his attention to Julian, his tone dangerously smooth. Perhaps you can explain this remarkable coincidence. Julian stammered, his carefully constructed television persona shattering under the bright lights. There must be some mistake. That recipe is mine. I developed it. He trailed off, sweating visibly, unable to meet the judge's piercing stare. The cameras lingered on his panicked face. I stood beside my station, calm and composed, letting the silence stretch. I didn't need to say anything more. The evidence spoke for itself. In the audience, I spotted Arthur Hemlock, the critic Julian had inadvertently insulted weeks ago. He was watching the unfolding drama with a faint, satisfied smile. Julian's career, built on charm and stolen glory, was cracking in real time, broadcast live to millions of viewers. He looked wildly around the set, searching for someone, anyone to rescue him. And then, as if summoned by the sheer force of his unraveling, a figure stepped onto the stage from the wings. It was Ms. Davies, the head county health inspector, holding a clipboard and looking decidedly unimpressed with the theatrical chaos unfolding before her. The timing was perfect. Everything was proceeding exactly according to my carefully prepared recipe for justice. His public humiliation was just reaching the boiling point.
"Excuse the interruption," Ms. Davies announced, her voice cutting through the tense silence on set. "We received an anonymous tip regarding the potential use of a prohibited substance in this competition. Routine pre-competition checks of the workstations have revealed traces of an unidentified, possibly illicit botanical ingredient at Chef Vance's station." She held up a small, sealed evidence bag containing a few specks of dark red powder. The camera zoomed in, capturing Julian's raw panic. His eyes darted wildly around the studio, from the judges to the audience to me. "Who told them?" he shouted, his voice cracking, forgetting the microphones, forgetting the live broadcast. "Who snitched?" He scanned the faces in the crowd, his gaze landing on several members of the Gilded Spoon staff who had come to watch. I just calmly folded my prep towel, my expression as serene as a sunrise over a calm lake. He didn't know the connection. He didn't know that stern, efficient Ms. Davies, the health inspector currently dismantling his career on national television, had been one of my first culinary students years ago. A bright young woman I had mentored when she was struggling to find her place in the demanding world of professional kitchens. She owed me nothing, but she valued integrity. And the anonymous tip, complete with details only I could provide, had been very persuasive. She was simply doing her job, ensuring food safety regulations were followed. By evening, the fallout was catastrophic for Julian. The Golden Flame competition disqualified him immediately. News outlets picked up the story. Celebrity chef disqualified amid cheating and illegal ingredient scandal. His sponsors, the high-end knife company, the organic produce supplier, the cookware line, pulled their endorsements one by one, issuing carefully worded statements about upholding integrity. His name trended on social media for all the wrong reasons, accompanied by hashtags like Chef Scandal and hashtag Recipe Thief. Back at the Gilded Spoon, the atmosphere was thick with shock and whispered conversations. Julian stormed into the prep room later that night after service had ended, finding me quietly cleaning my station. His eyes were wild, his expensive chef jacket stained and disheveled. "You did this!" he screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You set me up! You ruined me!" I didn't flinch. I simply continued wiping down the stainless steel counter, my movements calm and deliberate. "You did this to yourself, Julian," I replied evenly, meeting his furious gaze. "You stole, you cheated, and you treated people poorly. Consequences were inevitable." He let out a roar of frustration and slammed a heavy ceramic mixing bowl against the floor. It shattered, sending sharp fragments skittering across the tiles. He stood there, breathing heavily amidst the debris, looking utterly defeated. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly comprehend in his self-absorbed rage, was that his fall wasn't over yet. The public humiliation was just the beginning. A week after the Golden Flame debacle, I sat down at my kitchen table with the folder I had been meticulously compiling for months. It contained everything: time-stamped audio recordings of Julian's insults and threats, printouts of emails documenting his attempts to sabotage my ingredient orders, and written, signed testimonies from Maria, Leo, Sophia, Anya, and 3 other staff members detailing specific instances of his harassment, bullying, and unprofessional conduct. Everyone had been ready to talk once his public image shattered. He had burned too many bridges, created too many enemies with his arrogance and cruelty. No one felt loyal enough to protect him anymore. I drafted a formal letter to the restaurant's board of directors outlining Julian's pattern of behavior and its negative impact on kitchen morale and operations. I attached copies of the testimonies and referenced the audio recordings, offering to provide the full files upon request. I didn't make demands or accusations. I simply presented the facts, letting his own words and actions condemn him. I mailed the letter via certified mail, ensuring it would arrive directly into the hands of Mr. Sterling and the other board members. Julian likely thought the worst was over, that he could perhaps lay low for a while and then attempt a comeback. He had no idea that the quiet line cook he dismissed as grandma was about to deliver the final, fatal blow to his career at the Gilded Spoon. When the board scheduled an emergency meeting a few days later, I received an unexpected invitation to attend. The boardroom was intimidating. Polished mahogany table, leather chairs, portraits of stern-faced former owners lining the walls. Mr. Sterling and the 4 other board members sat looking grim. Julian was not present. He hadn't even been invited. They had clearly reviewed the evidence I sent. The testimonies, the references to recordings, it painted an undeniable picture of a toxic work environment fostered by their star chef. They asked me questions, quietly, respectfully, about the stolen recipe, about the incident with the oil, about the burn on my wrist, which had mostly healed but still showed a faint scar, about the atmosphere in the kitchen under Julian's leadership. I answered honestly, sticking to the facts, avoiding emotional language. When they finally asked me what I wanted, what resolution I sought, I paused. I could have demanded compensation, a public apology, his permanent blacklisting from the industry. Instead, I said simply, I just want the truth restored. I want the kitchen to be a place where people feel safe and respected again, where the focus is on the food, not on fear. Mr. Sterling nodded slowly, exchanging glances with the other board members. Then he looked at me. Elena, in light of everything we've learned, and considering your experience and the respect you clearly command from the staff, the board would like to offer you the position of head chef. I was stunned into silence for a moment. Head chef? It was the position Julian had held, the pinnacle of the kitchen hierarchy. But I declined. Politely, but firmly. My revenge wasn't about climbing the ladder or seizing power. It was about reclaiming my peace, my dignity, and the integrity of the kitchen I loved. Julian left town within days of the board meeting, disappearing without a word. His fancy apartment was emptied, his locker cleaned out. The restaurant took down his portrait from the Our Chef display in the lobby hallway, and to my surprise, replaced it with a simple, dignified photograph of me, captioned, Elena Morrow, culinary heart of the Gilded Spoon.
The kitchen felt different immediately. The constant tension eased. Laughter returned during prep time. The younger cooks started asking me questions again, seeking advice, sharing ideas, without fear of being mocked or dismissed. For the first time in years, the kitchen felt quiet in the right way. Focused, professional, collaborative. Some nights, standing by the stove during a busy service, I'd still hear the phantom hiss of boiling oil from that day, or see Julian's smirk in my memory. But the images no longer carried the sting of humiliation. They were just reminders of a battle fought and won. The burn scar on my wrist had faded to a pale silver line, a map of where I'd been. Life settled into a new, calmer rhythm, until one evening, cleaning out my locker at the end of a long week, I found something tucked behind my spare apron. An unsigned, typewritten note. It contained only 4 words. "We're not done yet." A chill traced its way down my spine. Months passed without any further incident. The anonymous note remained a troubling mystery, but with no follow-up, I began to convince myself it was just a final, petty gesture from Julian or one of his few remaining loyalists. The kitchen thrived under the new head chef, a calm professional who valued teamwork. I enjoyed my role, mentoring the younger staff, focusing on my sauces. Then he resurfaced, not in person, but online. Julian Vance launched a series of comeback cooking videos filmed in a sleek, minimalist home kitchen. He presented a narrative of redemption, admitting past mistakes due to immense pressure and begging for a second chance. He looked different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a practiced humility. His eyes looked hollow, haunted. I watched a few of the videos, morbidly curious. The food looked competent, but lacked soul. He was a performer playing the part of a chef. I almost felt a flicker of pity for him. Almost. He had brought his downfall upon himself entirely. Then, scrolling through the comments below one of his videos, comments filled with supportive messages from fans willing to forgive him, I saw a name that made me freeze. A comment praising his resilience and hinting at exciting future collaborations was posted by Marco Imports, the official account of the very same high-end food distributor I suspected had supplied Julian with the illegal Amazonian fire leaf. They were backing him again, quietly trying to rebuild his career. Seeing the Marco Imports comment confirmed my lingering suspicions. Julian hadn't just found a new backer. He had likely reconnected with the same network that enabled his cheating in the first place. The distributor, Marco Bellini, probably saw Julian's comeback attempt as a way to salvage his own reputation and investment, hoping the scandal would blow over. But Bellini, like Julian, underestimated my patience and my memory. I still had the small sample of the Amazonian fire leaf I had taken from Julian's stash months ago. I also had the distributor's invoice I'd discreetly photographed from Julian's office files back when I was gathering evidence. An invoice vaguely listing specialty herbs, but shipped from a region known for the fire leaf. It wasn't definitive proof on its own, but combined with the tip about Julian's known use of the substance, it might be enough. I composed another anonymous email, this time addressed directly to the FDA's Import Violations Department, CCing Ms. Davies at the County Health Inspection Office for good measure. I detailed my suspicions about Marco Imports supplying banned ingredients, mentioned the Julian Vance scandal as related context, and attached the photograph of the invoice and a description of the fire leaf sample. I offered to provide the sample for testing if required. Within days, the investigation began. It was quiet at first, then explosive. Federal agents raided Marco Imports' warehouses. They found falsified import documents, undeclared substances, and clear evidence of a smuggling operation involving several banned ingredients, including the fire leaf. The company collapsed almost overnight under the weight of federal charges and massive fines, and with it, so did Julian Vance's comeback.
His funding dried up, his collaboration announcements vanished, his redemption narrative was exposed as being propped up by the very people who facilitated his cheating. This time, he stayed gone. His online presence vanished, the videos were deleted. Silence. The kitchen truly belongs to me again now. Not because I hold the title of head chef, I still have no desire for that administrative burden, but because its spirit feels right again. The clatter of pans, the sizzle of onions, the rhythmic chop of knives. These are sounds of creation, not conflict. I spend my days doing what I love, perfecting sauces, teaching techniques, sharing the knowledge accumulated over 3 decades. I mentor the new cooks, the ones with eager eyes and slightly nervous hands, the ones who remind me of who I used to be before cynicism tried to creep in. Sometimes, during a slow moment or after service while sharing a staff meal, they ask about Julian. What was he really like? Was the scandal as bad as the news made it seem? I don't gossip or rehash the ugly details. I just say, simply, he burned himself. They usually laugh, assuming I mean he literally burned himself in the kitchen, a common hazard. I just smile. But sometimes, standing alone by the hot stove, feeling the intense heat on my face, I whisper a silent acknowledgement. To the oil, to the fire, the dangerous elements of my profession, thank you. Thank you for teaching me restraint when I wanted to explode. Thank you for fueling a righteous anger that led to careful planning instead of impulsive action. Thank you for reminding me that the hottest fires forge the strongest steel. One quiet Tuesday evening, long after the restaurant had closed and the last dishwasher had clocked out, I found myself alone in the familiar sanctuary of the kitchen. On impulse, I gathered the ingredients for smoked rosemary beurre blanc, my sauce, the one Julian had stolen, the catalyst for his downfall. I moved with practiced grace, infusing the cream, smoking the rosemary, whisking the butter into a perfect, shimmering emulsion. I cooked the scallops exactly as I had during the competition, searing them to a delicate golden brown. I plated the dish perfectly on a simple white plate, drizzling the sauce artfully, garnishing with a single sprig of fresh rosemary. I sat down at the small staff table in the corner, the plate before me illuminated by the single-service light left on overhead. I took a bite. The sauce was sublime, balanced, complex, tasting of smoke and herbs and rich butter. It tasted better than ever. Because victory isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's slow, simmered over time, built layer by layer with patience and precision. Sometimes it's served cold, enjoyed in quiet solitude long after the battle is over. And somewhere out there, wherever Julian Vance ended up, he probably still dreams of beating me, of reclaiming his stolen glory. But some burns, the ones etched onto your reputation and your soul, never truly heal.